Hey guys, it's Marco in a very empty, easy shop. As you can see, JT is no longer here. And so today, we're gonna go fly it. What's up guys, and welcome to the hangar. Spoiler alert, right there in the opening, that was JT's latest landing. Yes, JT has flown already, and very well I'd say. And no, I did not take any video during the first few flights, and that's mostly because I had way too much to think about without having to worry about making content for the channel. So if you were looking for a first flight video, yeah, you might want to skip this video. This video will be entirely cockpit footage of my efforts to try to teach myself again how to use the GPS Navcom Garmin GNS480, which is my main radio, all over again. Since the last time I used it was almost 2 years ago, before I started with the fuel injection upgrade. So now that you've seen JT and you know that she flies well, let's look at a short IFR flight from Chesapeake to Elizabeth City Coast Guard Station. We're just gonna do a GPS runway 10 approach, a full mix approach, holding entry, and then maybe a GPS runway 5 approach back into Chesapeake. I will fumble a lot with the radios and various knobs. As I said, I'm trying to teach myself how to best do this from the ground up. Hopefully this will help someone else in the near future, and you just know who you are. Also, and very unfortunately, I will have to talk over the video to explain what I'm doing, since I still don't have a way to capture communication. So let's get it started. So I've finished all my pre-flight checks. Again, pushing the mixture rich, and I'm lining up for takeoff. Taking off runway 5, then we're gonna make a U-turn to the left, climb to 2,000 feet. Okay, so we apply full power here, and we're just gonna let it roll down the runway. And at this point, we're gonna fast forward it a little bit to make it a little quicker. It looks like airspeed is alive. Once we get to about 60, 70 knots here, we're gonna rotate. There we go, rotate, get airborne positive ready, gear up. And once we get to a certain altitude, it looks safe. We're just gonna make a left turn back around, make a U-turn to the southwest. And proceed direct to Suns. From Suns, we're gonna pick up a heading direct to Sego, which is the initial approach fix for the RNAV GPS runway 10 into Elizabeth City. No procedure turn coming from that direction. Okay, it's gonna look like I'm flailing a lot on this flight, and that's because it's bumpy as heck today. At this point, I'm trying to get the autopilot to engage in heading mode and vertical speed plus 500 feet a minute, so that I can join up on my altitude of 2,000 feet. And I have a heading to intercept the course directly to Suns right now. Top right corner of my PFD, you might notice that the caption goes to capture, and that means that we're getting to our altitude, and so I'm pulling the power back to remain 120 knots. I'm flying this whole thing at 120 knots just to give myself a little time. Up until this point, I've been talking on radio number 1, which is my GNS480. You can see the audio panel blinking. I'm transmitting on 23075, telling Chesapeake traffic that I'm departing to the southwest. Time to pick up the latest weather for Elizabeth City, so I'm going to switch over on radio number 2 on 124375, which I already have in the box, so I can listen to the weather, but I also turn on the audio for number 1 so I can still listen to Chesapeake traffic, make sure nobody's coming my direction. You can see that I have a caution red, actually that's orange light on top of the PFD that says gear canopy. Just please disregard that. I need to adjust the micro switch to turn that on and off. Right now I have the throttle switch connecting at still a pretty high power setting, I think around 1900. So every time I pull the power down to 1900 RPM, that light comes on to tell me that I don't have the gear down right now. So just please disregard that. I need to adjust the micro switch in the throttle system. So the weather's starting to come in on radio number 2. So I'm gonna quickly write down his information hotel there in Elizabeth City. And then I'm just gonna write down a couple of numbers that I want to remember, but mostly for when I talk to the tower, Elizabeth City. I'm gonna let them know that I have information hotel and I know what the weather is. And as you can see, we're gonna change the altimeter setting to 3015. Next, I want to find out exactly where I am, so when I call Elizabeth City Tower, I can tell them I'm, I don't know, 20 miles north west of the field. I'm going to use my right thumb right there to flip-flop radio number 2, the standby frequency 120.5, into the active so that I can talk to Elizabeth City. So now that I have a second to think, I'm just going to pull out my little cheat sheet on how to shoot approaches. That section is on LPV approaches. I'm going to review all the steps that I need to do to shoot a successful approach. And then after that, we're going to brief myself the approach. Now if you pay attention to my left thumb, you're going to see me depressing the little push to talk on the throttle, and I'm talking to Elizabeth City Tower, letting them know where I am, and they told me to basically report final approach fix inbound, which would be Motu. So the push to talk button on the throttle is basically a duplicate of the one that goes through the joystick, although it goes straight to the audio panel, bypassing every other connection. The reason I put it there, first of all, just to have a backup, and then also because sometimes it's easier to write down the clearances with my right hand and then repeat them by pressing the button with the left hand without having to swing around the joystick. I try to get as much done as soon as possible so that I have a little more free time toward the end. So you can see we're still kind of just barely we just barely left the Chesapeake airspace, and we already kind of set up the shoot and approach down in Elizabeth City. So now you see that for flight is going to suggest that I pick up the latest weather right there, but you know, we're already way ahead of the game, and that's the way we want to do it. So what we got left now is just to review this approach. So I'm going to start reading the approach plates and just brief myself, review the tops, the bottoms, the missed approach procedure, the frequency, etc., and that way I know what to expect when we start the approach. We could have gone straight to the final approach fix Motu if we wanted to. As a matter of fact, I think that's what Elizabeth City Tower suggested, but I explained to them that we're just doing some training. We wanted to fly the full procedure, starting at Suns, and then Sago, the initial approach fix Isubi, and then Motu. And so that's why this is going to take a little bit longer than it would in real life. And by real life, I mean an actual IFR flight plan. We are obviously flying VFR today, pretending to be in instrument meteorological conditions. I also did request to fly the full go-around procedure to include the holding at Suns. Of course, once I'm out of their airspace, they don't care what I do, but you know, I had to let them know. And talking about Suns, looks like we're coming up on Suns, so I will set up my heading back there for 147 course out of Suns to Sago, which is initial approach fix. And you will see my waypoint light that will start flashing on the left there under the terminal mode light, just to remind me that we got a waypoint coming up. There it is right now. And so the autopilot should be turning here any second. You can see some of the displays flickering. Look at the PFD, it's flickering right now. But that's only on the video. In real life, that's a steady screen. It doesn't really flicker like that. And so I've been super busy up until this point, and now that I get a little time to look around, I just realized that I'm burning like 7 gallons an hour, 120 knots. That's just not quite right. And if you look at my EGTs, are like way down, like in 1100 degrees. So I decided to pull the mixture back and lean up the mixture, bring up the CHT so we don't, bring up the EGT so we don't start fouling things up with lead. And you know, just to reduce the fuel consumption, we go from 7 gallons an hour to about 4.5 gallons an hour, which, you know, there's just no need to waste gas like that. Been pretty busy up until this point, so I decided to pull up my LPV approach cheat sheet just to make sure, review that one more time so that I can have the airplane configured exactly right. Last thing I want is getting all the way to Isubi and the airplane turns right instead of turning left. So I just wanted to double check and make sure that I got this stuff figured out, since you know, this is probably the first approach that I do since in the past 2 years with JT, so I'm still learning. Coming up to Sago, and I got a turn coming up, 193 course. I decided to put the heading on 193. I mean, it's really not necessary, but to me, if I do that, it means I'm on top of things and I'm kind of ahead of what I need to be doing. So as soon as we get a little bit closer, again, the waypoint light will start flashing again, and then we will turn south to heading 193 plus or minus wind correction. So here's the waypoint light coming up, and autopilot's gonna have to make a right turn. Now you can see that it's climbing right now, and then it gained like 150 feet, and then it's gonna start descending, and then it's gonna lose a whole bunch. So it's kind of like a bit overshooting. I'm really not sure why it's doing that. So there you go. I'll touch it with my hand to make sure we don't bust any minimums. Not that there's any, but you can see how it's got a bit of excursion going up again now. I'm not really too happy about how it's doing that. Probably gonna need to do a little more fine to figure out what's going on. Maybe some setting on the pitch trim that I need to, the pitch control that I might need to adjust. All right, meanwhile, I've activated the approach, the LPV approach on the top left of the PDF. You see LPV1 in green, and you also see SAP10 in black. SAP10 is the synthetic approach for runway 10 overlay. And on the right side, on top of the altitude, you see a black LPV1, which is the basically standby for the vertical capture of the glide slope for the LPV approach. And since we're coming up on the final approach course, I pull the power back, try and slow it down. I normally just shoot the approach around 90 knots, and if I have the runway made down to minimums, I put the speed brake down and land. But normally fly the approach, as I said, 90 knots. So I have an airspeed switch on the horn, indicator horn, that it activates at about 100 knots. So if by the time the speed reduces to 100 knots, I don't have the gear down, it will start beeping. And the only way to make it stop is just to put the gear down. Final course is 103 degrees, so I just set it up here, again, in an effort to stay ahead of the airplane, and it should start turning pretty soon. So here's my waypoint light that just reminds me that I have a turn coming up. It's a left turn to 103 degrees for the final approach course. The green number that you see in the center of the PFD 1871, that is give or take the height above touchdown zone elevation. It's a computer generated number based on the altitude that I'm at right now and the airfield elevation. It's kind of nice to have, but it's not really super necessary. Ideally, since our minimums are 261 feet MSL, that is 250 feet AGL, that's what it would read. It would read 250 feet by the time we reach 261 feet MSL. That's just good to know, but yeah, it doesn't hurt to have it. And now we just got 3 indication of glide slope. We have on the PFD up on top, there's a set of there's a CDI that is vertical on the right side of the screen, kind of parallel to the altitude tape. And on the bottom screen, you can see there's one in the same position on the right side of the screen, vertically oriented. And then there's another one on the HSI, so you can see a green bar. The green bar is the same as the other needle, the yellow needle on the right side and on the PFD. And we'll start coming down as the glide slope get closer and closer, as we get closer and closer to the glide slope, rather. What I like about the setup is that all you really need is one of these mini APs to shoot the approach, because on the top, in the PFD, we have a course and we have a glide as well as a flight director. And should that one fail, you can turn the HSI there into a PFD and have the same information. So one of these screens is enough to shoot the full approach. One thing that is worth mentioning is that when we made the turn at Isubi onto the final approach course, we went from terminal mode to approach mode. So on top of the radius tag, you can see now the light says approach mode, which kind of indicates that we have more sensitivity on our course indications. Also very important is the fact that the glide slope is starting to come down. You can see the green bar on the HSI is is starting to come down, and you can see the same thing happening on the PFD to the left of the vertical speed indicator, and on the HSI down on the right side of the screen. So as soon as that centers up, we're gonna capture our LPV approach vertical profile, and the airplane's gonna start descending. Also, we're coming up on our final approach fix, so we gotta remember to call the Coast Guard tower there at Elizabeth City. Alright, so the glide slope is centered up. Time to do a GUMPS check. Gas, undercarriage, mixture, pumps, switches, speed brake. The S kind of catches them all, but just making sure we're configured for landing. And now I'm pressing the trigger switch on the joystick, and you can see the audio panel light blinking and transmitting to Elizabeth City and letting them know that we're just about to enter their airspace. And these airplanes really hard to make them come down on the LS approach. You can see having a hard time holding on to 90 knots. I'm down to 1400, now 1200 RPM, so we're pretty much basically at idle. So it's really important that you get your speed set up before you start the approach, because if you start coming down at 120 knots, it's going to be very, very hard to slow it down.
Alright, 1,000 feet, approach altitude.
At this point, we're just looking basically on our altimeter to reach our minimum, actually be the decision altitude of 261 feet above sea level, which is 250 feet above the ground. And you can see at the center of the PFD, right under my finger, like slightly left of my finger, there's a mist caption. That means that when you go missed approach, you press that button and that will trigger the GPS, the GNS480, to know that you're going missed approach and provide navigation for the missed approach. Looks like we reached our decision altitude of 261 feet. Time to press the missed button. That's going to sequence the autopilot and the flight director and the GPS to fly the missed approach. All I have to do is raise the gear, raise the flap, speed brake, add power, and just kind of watch the airplane, make sure it doesn't do anything weird right now. Again, everything is still on autopilot. I normally use the same procedure that I do at my airlines, so we do minimums going around, flaps 20, check thrust, pause your gear up, set missed approach altitude, and then make sure we got a navigational mode that we can use, either heading or track or LNAV, and then continue on. Eventually get to 1,000 feet and clean it up, and proceed to the missed approach point. So in this case, the flaps 20 is going to be speed brake up. Of course, we never put it down, but I still touch it and push it up with my finger just in case. And I realized that happened pretty fast, but if you go back and look at it, you can see me pressing the button, adding power, raising the gear, raising the flap, and I didn't quite put the altitude right there right away because I wanted to make sure that the airplane was climbing on its own. And once I felt like it was safe, then I went back and set, I think, 2,000 feet for the missed approach altitude. Okay, looks like we're getting to 2,000 feet. I'm gonna clean up a little bit the speed brake and the gear switches, pull the power back, and configure the airplane. There you go, pull the mixture back a little bit, and I'm gonna fast forward it all the way to the entry into the hold. All right, so we fast forwarded a little bit. You can see we're there on the iPad. We are approaching our missed approach holding fix of Suns. You see on the top left of the airplane, you can see the terminal mode light is back on. So we're no longer on approach mode, we're back on terminal mode. Let's zoom in a little bit there. You can see that we expect to reach Sun and probably do a parallel entry, I would imagine. Go outbound on the 227, then do a course reversal, probably like do 180 plus another 45 degrees or so, and join back up directly into Suns. I get a message there on the GNS480. When I look at it, it tells me that is a hold parallel ahead. So we have confirmed that we have a parallel entry into the holding. You can see my left hand is keying the mic. I'm talking on COM 1. You can see the light blinking. Talking to Chesapeake CTAF now, let everybody know that I'm going to be entering a hold into Suns. Just make sure everybody knows where everybody's at. So when you get to Suns, that's the last waypoint on our flight plan. If you look at the GNS480 there's no other waypoint after that. So once we reach there, the suspend light comes on, which tells us that, hey, there's no other waypoint after this. So all indication from now on are going to be predicated on this waypoint. And that can be turned on and off manually, but in this case, we're going to have to load another approach into Chesapeake first before we can get rid of that light. And just to let you know, it looks like my hands are flailing about a lot. As I said, it's a very bumpy day, and I have stabilized the video in post-production here, so it looks like the instrument panel is fairly steady, but my hand looks like it's flailing a lot. In real life, it's probably just the opposite, but that's what all that all that flailing is about. So we're in the hold now with nothing better to do. The airplane is happily flying himself around the hold. If we leave it alone, it's gonna keep flying the hold until we run out of gas. So we need to start thinking about what is coming next. So first thing to do, we need to load the new approach plates for the GPS runway 5 at Chesapeake. So we're gonna load it up in the iPad first. And this is when I get a little confused, because I need to load up a new flight plan. Basically, we're done with the one we had before. So the new flight plan is going back to Chesapeake, present position direct to Chesapeake, or Chesapeake to Chesapeake. The problem is that when I activate that, I'm going to end up losing the hold. So I'm trying to debate that in my head. And so I ended up executing the new flight plan. There I go, executing the flight plan, and end up with the Chesapeake to Chesapeake. So now the plane is technically no longer flying the hold, but it's going direct to Chesapeake, which is not what I was trying to do. Luckily, Chesapeake is right in front of me, so the plane keeps going straight while I switch to heading mode and enter 048 heading. Okay, while this is going on, I'm in heading mode, flying. I'm hoping to get this thing done before I pass the suns, but you see I'm loading up the RNAV approach to runway 5. Unfortunately, I did not execute the approach, so the approach remained in the modified flight plan, but you can only go direct to a waypoint that is in the active flight plan, not in the modified flight plan. So when I press direct to, the GNS480 showed me the empty flight plan, Chesapeake to Chesapeake. Eventually realized what was happening and executed the modified flight plan with the loaded approach, which then became the active flight plan. So I could finally try to go direct to suns. Too bad that now was already a beam suns, so I had to switch and go direct to Naldi, which is the next waypoint on the approach. Now in real IMC, I would have given myself plenty more time in the hole to sort things out, like check the weather, brief the approach to myself, but the gas is expensive and I was trying to save a few bucks, and since I'm very familiar with the approach and the weather, I did it all as I went. This time around I was a bit rushed and I forgot to activate the synthetic approach overlay. The synthetic approach is not really needed, but it's nice to have, and because of that we do not have the radar altimeter like green numbers in the middle of the primary flight display, and no highway in the sky boxes to fly through as well. No, and again, not a big deal, but evidence that I needed more time. glide slope is alive. If you look at the green bar in the bottom display, the green horizontal bar, you see that it's starting to come down. Once it reaches center, the glide slope will be captured, and we're going to start our descent. So we'll do a quick gums check, make sure everything's set up. Gas, undercarriage, mixture, pump, speed brake. Speed brake, we're going to keep them up, as also for switches. Looks like the lights are still off right now. And just about now we are capturing the glide slope, so we're going to reduce the power, start going down, and with my right hand you'll see I'll depress the trigger switch, and I'll be talking to Chesapeake traffic, let them know that I'm on the final approach fix inbound. Just like in the previous approach, we're going to let the autopilot fly the course and the glide slope all the way down to 218 feet, which is 200 feet above the ground this time. Interestingly enough, there was an intercollegiate landing competition that was just about to start, and I was trying to hurry up because the judges were already lining up on the left side of the runway. Time to turn on the recognition lights in the landing mode. Here, do another gums check because why not? It can only help. Welcome back to Chesapeake. I hope you enjoyed the flight. There's still much to be learned and skill to be honed, but now you have at least a pretty good idea of how much work single pilot IFR in a small cockpit can be. I am pretty happy about how it went, although there are a few things I need to do better, but that requires more practice. Oh darn, I'll have to go fly again. The GRT displays work well, although the autopilot could do much better. I might have to dig deeper into its settings. Fuel injection modification has worked flawlessly from day one, so I think we're well on our way to start having more fun and worry a bit less. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the flight line.